Welcome to the Gospel Ambition Podcast. The Gospel Ambition Podcast is a podcast or ministry of Grace Players Church. Grace Players Church exists to honor God by multiplying devoted followers of Jesus. Today, I'm excited to be joined by my friend and co-laborer in the gospel, Wes Nottingham.
Yeah, it's great to be here. No, thank you guys so much for inviting me out. I'm excited to have some good discussion.
This is good. So you and I have known each other a really long time now.
Long time, yeah.
It's cool. As I think about our relationship, it spans, you being a student, me as an intern, and then, you are from our church originally. Actually, before, I won't tell your background.
Sure.
You go ahead and share some of your story.
Definitely.
Where you're from, talk about your family a little bit, and where you're at in ministry now.
Yeah. So I grew up in the Columbus area, so I grew up in Westerville. Lived there pretty much my whole life until I moved away for college. Grew up at Grace Players Church. I mean, really, when I was born, that's when I started going to Grace Players. So it was my church for the entirety of growing up. Loved it here. This is really where I attribute a lot, where my life and faith is concerned. I mean, this is where I think I grew a love for the gospel, a love for Jesus, and a love for the local church right here in these doors. So, it's been huge being a part of Grace Polaris. But my mom and dad were a part of Grace Polaris since the 70s and 80s. So they were here for a very long time as well. But yeah, grew up in the church. I went to Worthington Christian School, which is the school affiliated with the church, K through 12. And for college, I went to Liberty University. I got my undergrad and graduate degrees there. My undergrad was in theology and apologetics. My graduate degree was a Master of Divinity in Biblical Studies. And now I'm blessed to be working in the church. I am the lead pastor at Delaware Grace Church as of recently, actually.
It's really cool, even just to hear you say that. That's why even as I started, our relationship has gone through there's many phases. So I knew you as when you were a middle school student, and I came here as an intern back, years ago now. Yeah. Then we worked together as you were one of our first interns, actually, in the formal program that we have now. And then came on as a resident, and we've been in we were talking even before this about when we traveled to Europe together.
Yep.
And so we've known each other, again, a lot. So now, though, just, recently you were installed as the lead pastor. And so to hear you introduce yourself that way is like so cool, because now we get to serve kind of as, two lead pastors of sister churches trying to do gospel ministry in this area together. So I'm just really grateful for you. And so the conversation we're having today is about leadership, leadership development, leadership in the church. And you represent kind of an example of somebody, again, born in our church, raised through it, discipled through the ministry, then received formal theological education, and then came back for ongoing training preparation. And now we've sent to, again, a sister church and to see you ministry in that way. You represent the best of some of our leadership development that we care about. So that's great.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, I'm very grateful for how Grace Polaris and its leaders have poured into me as a leader. I firmly believe that I would not be in the position I am today if it were not for Grace Players Church and their willingness to and their commitment to develop leaders.
It's cool. All right, so this season we're talking about essential elements of a healthy church, and so we've talked about a variety of things, but today we're going to say a healthy church is committed and it's committed to leaders, and it's led by godly and qualified leaders. Leaders are necessary for the church. Before we get into offices of the church and roles in the church, what's your perspective on just why leaders are necessary? Like, some people will like to talk about, we're a church, right? Because we get together in a coffee shop and we're reading the Bible, or my family's a church because, we're gathering around the Word or something like that. But an essential element is, healthy leaders. Why is leadership so necessary for the church, just in general?
Yeah. I mean, if we're talking in generalizations, I mean, it's this thing where God has ordained that the mission of His church is carried out almost on the shoulders of godly, qualified leaders. And of course, qualify that with, yes, obviously, the Lord is the one doing the work.
Right.
But the way that he set up his church and the way that he set up his kingdom to advance is through leaders. I think of Acts chapter 6, and we might get to that a little bit later in the podcast, where there's some organizational elements happening. It's the apostles are seeing this issue in the church, and they're saying, okay, how can we best organize in this moment? And it's interesting as you read, because the purpose of that reorganization was for the mission. It was so that the word can be preached. It was so that prayer could happen. And so really, one of the main reasons that leaders matter is because the mission of the church is carried out with leaders. That's just kind of how God has structured his church. So it's a very important where the mission of the church is concerned.
And this is true from the beginning of time. When God created Adam and Eve, I think he gives Adam headship in that relationship. He's called that. And then throughout the history of Israel, Israel is led by leaders. It's overseen by leaders. Abraham is the leader of his family. Then you have the prophets and kings and all these people. It is about the leaders who God ordains to be the representative and overseer. But that's for the flourishing of all those under the leader's care. So you were mentioning that already. There in Ephesians 4 is maybe a text about leaders and the leadership. What does a leader do? Well, a leader equips those under their care. So Ephesians 4 verse 11 says, "And he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds and teachers to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ until we attain the unity of the faith and the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, so that we may no longer be children, tossed to and fro by waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes. Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way to him who is the head, into Christ." So all to say is the leaders there for the church, and then even we could say every leader throughout history is designed to equip those under their care for flourishing, for maturity. And so that's why we need leaders in the church in the first place.
And even that kind of, I really hone in that chapter, equip the people for the work of ministry. And that's huge. A lot of times when we talk about leaders, we think, oh, leaders, they're the ones who do the ministry. And yes, that's true. But as we read in Ephesians 4, it's, well, they're equipping the people to do the work of the ministry. So it's not like, the question is not who's doing ministry and who's not doing ministry. It's we're all doing ministry, and leaders are here so that the people can be equipped to do their ministry as well.
I think it was J.D. Greer who I heard talk about leadership in the church in this way. He says, when I became a pastor, I left the ministry. And what he meant by that, what he means by that, and I think it's a provocative way of saying it, because I'm going into ministry. We talk about vocational ministry or whatever. But what he means, and I think it helpfully, is say when you become a leader in the church in that capacity, is saying part of my job is to equip the saints to flourish for ministry, to encourage one another, to love each other for a variety of things. So it's kind of a unique role. But healthy churches need leaders. All right, so let's talk about maybe two offices of leadership that we would say are ongoing offices. Even in Ephesians 4, we see the mention of apostles, prophets, evangelists, and then shepherds, teachers. I think you and I would agree that the office of apostle, the office of prophet has certainly ceased in terms of that leadership office that is not ongoing in the church. So the remaining, so he mentions shepherds and teachers there, which we would probably say are pastors. So I think biblically speaking, we would say that the two leadership offices in the church that exist today are elders or pastors and deacons. So let's begin with elders. Who are elders and what do they do? What would, as we were to define, this is who an elder is, where would you go? What would you say?
Yeah, and before I kind of dive into that question, I would add overseer as well, because so we have these three synonymous titles or roles in Scripture that kind of connect to what we're talking about. That's elder, overseer, pastor kind of thing. And as far as like what do elders do?
So before you go into that, that's an important thing, because maybe other denominations would say that all three of those are different offices in the church. We would believe that those three terms are synonymous, referring to the same office,
Yes.
and they're describing different elements of that
Yes.
office. So that's an essential piece.
Yeah,
of that.
definitely. But no, so to answer the question, who is an elder? What does an elder do? You can't start without going to 1 Timothy and Titus. And so we can just go there real quick.
for it.
I'll just read in 1 Timothy chapter 3 verses 1 to 7. It just kind of lays it out. The saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to the office of overseer, he desires a noble task. Therefore an overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own household well with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become puffed up with conceit and fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders, so that he may not fall into disgrace, into a snare of the devil. I won't read Titus. It's a very similar kind of list. But who elders are has a lot to do with not what they do, but their character. And it's interesting that there's only really one element in that list as to what they do, and that's teach. Right. Otherwise, it's all about who they are. What is their character? Is their character that after Christ? Is their character godly? And so that's huge. I mean, that's a really important qualification, I think. And outside of that, what they do is, I think the easiest way to say it, and there's more you can explain, but they oversee the spiritual health of the church. That's kind of what elders do in a nutshell. So yeah.
Well, and even going back to those terms that we talked about of overseer or bishop, it would be the word that we'd come up with there. Overseer or elder, and then shepherd. So there's a shepherding element that's maybe caring for the flock, praying for the flock. Shepherd, though, is sometimes we think about that by way of just a gift, but really it's an office as well. Shepherd throughout the Bible is used synonymously with leadership. Overseeing probably has some kind of administrative oversight that's going on in the church. And then, but the essential element of that certainly is teaching. They're tasked with teaching the word. So even that phrase, they're apt to teach, that there's clearly something that within the local church, teaching is always associated or often associated with elder oversight there. So that's what they're doing, but it's in the primary leadership of the church, maybe not just spiritually, but primarily spiritually there, that the elders are especially tasked with the ministry of the word and prayer for the people. In that list, though, is there what do you find, is there one or two of those attributes that maybe sticks out as that's insightful or surprising or anything in the list that sticks out to you?
I think what self-controlled sticks out to me quite a bit. Hospitable sticks out to me as well. I mean, if I had to pick two, that would be the two I might pick. Hospitable. That's one of those qualities that I think is so. It's so important that leaders, they don't just lead from a stage. They don't just lead way up there. It's not just, oh yeah, my pastor's in his office, but it's this this welcoming attitude of leaders. It's that they are inviting people in without prejudice. That's kind of what this hospitality element means, and that is really, really big when it comes to what an elder should look like in the church. And self-controlled, I mean, yeah, if leaders aren't marked by self-control, a lot can go wrong, and a lot can go wrong really quickly.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes we think about leaders as, even being like hotheads or, kind of abrasive at times, but yeah, that self-controlled, that there's they can govern themselves in some capacity. I think what's remarkable about the list really is how unremarkable it is. Like one of my favorite phrases related to this is when a pastor, I remember hearing say it this way. He says, what should be true of every Christian must be true of elders. And so a lot of these things are not high and lofty, but it's a character quality. There are character qualities that should be true of every Christian, or aspirational of every Christian. Doesn't mean perfect by any means, but it does say that you're known for these things. But it's not, it's remarkably unremarkable. But I think the phrase that kind of is the significant catch-all, therefore an overseer must be above reproach. And I think a good way to define that is simply to say, if somebody made an accusation about an elder, that the community would be able to say, that would be so surprising, or that doesn't sound like him at all, that they've led in such a way that their lives speak for themselves. They have a good reputation, even that good reputation among outsiders, that people outside the church, they'd be well thought of. You know, if you were, we actually, in some of our elder process, we have a new elder has to, or a prospective elder has to provide some references, and some of those are outside the church, and we call them and say, hey, you know, this could be a coworker, a neighbor, how are they known? And it would be so devastating if you say, hey, you know, this person is, we're interested in bringing them on as an elder, a leader, a pastor in our church. What do you think about them? It would be awful if a neighbor said, that person's a Christian? Are you kidding me? Like, so the above reproach, I think, is a significant catch-all. So let's spend any more time on what an elder does. You know, this can be kind of vague a little bit. Anything that you would say even related to the plurality of elders and why that's essential in a healthy church.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, one comment on something you said just a second ago, this idea that this list should be true of all Christians. There's no concept of a category of super Christians in the Bible. So this is, when we read these lists, it's not like, okay, that's good for the leaders, but I guess I'm off the hook. That's not how it works. But yeah, plurality of elders, that's something I really, really value. I think it's an Old Testament teaching that in multiplicity there's wisdom in multiple people, and so like I want to make sure that the church is led by multiple elders, not just one or two guys.
And here you are as a younger pastor. You know, people could be listening to this and go, like, who are these young guys? Have any idea what they're talking about? But as a younger pastor, both of us, and you especially, are be able to say, I need the wisdom of a team. You know, that this isn't just about the lead guy who's compensated to do this, and it's about a team of pastors, a team of elders who are participating, shouldering these kinds of things together. That's healthy. That's good and fruitful.
It's huge. It's huge. And I actually had a conversation with someone the other day, and they were asking about my church, about the church size, and then they asked me how many elders I had. And we have 6 elders, and he was like, "Whoa, you have that many?" And I was like, I didn't even think it was that many. And then he told him the story of his church. It was around similar size, and they only have 3 elders. Which again, I mean, it's not like we're not saying right or wrong. It's just like, I crave that multiple voices so that I can make sure that we're going in the right direction, because there's again wisdom from multiple sources. So that's something I really put a high value on.
So the elders, we would say, have especially that plurality of elders. It's not one dude. It's not one individual who's the head of the church. Jesus is the head of the church, and has entrusted a plurality of elders to have authority over the congregation. That there's even in Hebrews, there's talk about submit to your elders who will give an account for you. I mean, that there's a significant realities related to elder authority in the church, but the benefit again of that plurality is there's not one elder who has the ultimate authority or say so. It's a plurality that goes into that. So they spend time teaching the word, leading people, caring for the flock, making decisions there. But there's another leadership office in the church, and that is of deacons that the Bible speaks of. You already mentioned kind of where we see maybe the first deacon in Acts 6. But who are deacons, and what do they do? Yeah,
and again, this is in a nutshell, this is how, right off the bat, I like to distinguish between the two. I already said elders in general, and you said there's more to elders than just spiritual leadership. But if elders oversee the spiritual health of the church, in a lot of ways, deacons oversee the physical health of the church. And again, there's more to that. But that, at the outset, in a nutshell, that's a good distinction. Yeah, that's a good way to simplify the clarification. Correct. And again, there's always more to it. But and that's kind of what I would say. I mean, again, in Acts 6, what do you see? The apostles saw this issue in organization. There were people not being cared for. And so they said, we have to change this. We have to make sure that the people of the church are cared for in a physical sense. And so they established this office of deacon. That's kind of where it comes from.
And deacon means servant.
Service, yeah, servant, really. So yeah, I mean, that's a simple answer.
So even there in Acts 6, there's this need. You clarified it. There's this need. People are being missed in the daily distribution of food, and the elders were taking time over this. And it's a fascinating phrase. And they say, no, we need to, or they look to the members, they look to the people, and they say, choose from among you, which would another real technically church office we could say is the office of member. So choose from among you those who will serve, those who will lead that. And the elders, the apostles say, for it's not good that we would neglect the ministry of the word and prayer to wait tables. So I think that what the apostles are saying there, they're not saying that one ministry is more beneficial than another. They're saying both of these ministries are so important that we need different groups of leaders to oversee them. Because the ministry of the word and prayer is essential. Caring for the needs of people is essential, and we need this different group to go on. Now, and then 1 Timothy 3 goes on to clarify qualifications for deacons. And you read elders, I'll read this one. Deacons likewise must be dignified, not double-tongued, not addicted to much wine, not greedy for dishonest gain. They must hold to the mystery of the faith with a clear conscience, and let them also be tested first. Then let them serve as deacons if they prove themselves blameless. Their wives likewise must be dignified, not slanderers, but sober-minded, faithful in all things. Let deacons each be the husband of one wife, managing their children and their own households well. For those who serve well as deacons gain a good standing for themselves and also great confidence in the faith that is in Christ Jesus. So a similar character list, remarkably unremarkable in some ways. So, but what else are the deacons kind of overseeing or caring for? You mentioned caring for the needs of the church or physical needs. Anything else that you'd add to what deacons are doing?
I think, in one sense, it is still a leadership position. So it's not just, in a lot of ways, we think, deacons are off to the side. When there's chairs that need set up in the church, we'll give a call to the deacons. They can do that. It is leadership. It's not just doing the work, but it's actually the leadership of the work. So it's not just doing the work of the care, but kind of overseeing the work of the care. Primarily, that's really the deacon's niche is right there.
And so with our deacons, one of the things that's part of their agenda is really to say who in our church needs cared for, and how are we going to facilitate that care or the service. So they're lead servants in thinking through what are the needs, the physical needs of our congregation. How do we do that? Deacons and elders should be working together to communicate those kinds of things, and so there's a healthy relationship that goes on between those two offices. But again, it's among the members that are recognizing, calling, electing, considering the character qualities there as well. One important thing that's essential for this conversation is that we would believe, and our fellowship believes this, you and I believe this, that the office of elder is reserved for men as qualified by Scripture, and yet the office of deacon, though, is open to women. Why do we believe that? What's necessary or about those distinctions, and how do we clarify those two different offices, and why, again, women cannot serve as elders but can serve as deacons?
Oh man, there's a lot of places we could start here. I guess I'll start with kind of like, why would we say that women could be deacons but not elders? I think when we read the lists in 1 Timothy 3, I think the very important thing that's missing in the list for deacons is teaching. And it's almost as if what's replaced is, instead of teaching, it's they must hold the mystery of the faith with a clear conscience. We won't read too much into that, but it's, and in a lot of ways, how does an elder actually go about the authority he has? In large part, it's his teaching.
The authority of the word is what's coming through there as elders. That's different than deacons.
Correct.
Absolutely.
And so deacons are not given that same sort of authoritative teaching role. And so right away we see the gates opening.
Because the most authoritative thing that an elder does is teach the word and say, thus saith the Lord, through his word, which is why that's so essential. Doesn't mean that women can't teach. We see that prescription 100%. In Titus 2, of course. But when it comes to congregation-wide authoritative teaching, that's part of what is that distinction.
Yes, that's huge. And I'll touch on that here in a second. And then the second thing I would say as far as why do we think deacons could be women is, in Romans 16, we see Phoebe called a deacon, diakonos. That's the Greek word for deacon, and it's attached. It's deacon of the church, and so we see Phoebe in Scripture as holding this official office as a deacon. So we would not see any problem with having women as deacons.
And even those who may not be convinced that Phoebe is a deacon, I think the answer is in Titus 3 or in 1 Timothy 3 for us as well. So in the first few verses about elders, it says that an overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife. Okay, so got that. That same clarification is given of deacons, but it also says their wives likewise. And the translation of that is important because wives could also be women likewise. So it could be relation to the wife of a deacon or just more general to women likewise. And the fact that there's no qualification for an elder's wife makes us go, well, could an elder's wife be a non-believer, not part of the church? And I'll think, no, we're not. I don't think it's suggesting that at all. But he's providing a qualification for women in the list of deacons, I believe, to give an understanding of, no, women serve as deacons in that office along with others, but they're not to serve in the office of elder there. So I think, again, the answer itself, you have to go, why would Paul provide a clarification in the deacon list that he wouldn't provide in the elder list? I think it's because women are permitted to serve as deacons in that capacity.
Sure. And I wish we had more time to talk about it, but if I was to be pressed for saying one single thing on why biblically we don't think the office of elder is, or it's permissible for women to be in the office of elder, is really just back up a few verses right there in 1 Timothy chapter 2. And the crux of it is that when Paul is talking about women in authoritative teaching ministry, he says that women can't be elders specifically because of the creation order. So right away I see that it's not a cultural thing, it is a creation mandate that he ties this to. And there's so much more to say on that, but that's kind of in a nutshell why that's my conviction.
And we'll get into another podcast someday about dealing with all those topics and those things. But as we near the wrapping up of this conversation, one of the things that's important is that we say leadership development is not just a gender issue, it's a whole church issue.
Absolutely.
We need, in our church, your church, we see leaders leading, men and women who are leading ministries in a variety of capacity. So let's begin to land the plane here on leaders and say, again, why is leadership development so essential? I would say that every church, and especially lead pastors, need to be thinking one of the key aspects of the role is developing leaders. So in the time we have remaining, why is leadership development so important?
Oh, man, I mean, if we go back to the beginning of our discussion, it's leaders are important for the mission of the church. And so if we want to see the church flourish in its mission, then we have to be committed to developing leaders. In one sense, all of the pastoral epistles are an exercise in Paul developing leaders. We see in 2 Timothy chapter 2, Paul tells Timothy, entrust this to faithful men. And of course, yes, leadership is, there's no gender bias in leadership. Women are leaders just as men, and they have to operate based on how God has ordained. But, leadership development is massive to the mission. So,
if you care about your church lasting beyond your own generation, you have to develop leaders. If you have a 100-year vision, if you have it's got to be developing the next group of people who will lead the congregation, who will be sent to other congregations. Leadership development is essential. So a healthy church is led by godly and qualified leaders in a variety of places, both in offices and among the church in general. So I'm grateful for you as a young leader, but as one who has experienced the development, and I know is committed to developing leaders as well for the sake of the gospel to the nations. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.